Hello PRG 205 students. In this lesson we are going to cover your assignment 2. So as you can see, I have Visual Studio open. I'm going to start a new project by clicking File, New Project. And because we are in this first class, we are using the console application because we're not yet working with forms. Now when you have the new console application, also just make sure that you have Visual C# over on the left hand side. Make sure you're not in the wrong language. No C++ here, people, C#. Okay, and then down here you have the name of your video. So this programming exercise is the height and width of a rectangle. So I'm just going to call it rectangle. Do pay attention to where the location is to where you're saving, because remember, you've got to zip all those files up and then send them in. So click OK, and then our new project will get started. And as we've talked about before, Visual Studio puts a lot of code actually in your program here. And so I'm just going to make a few comments. So remember, whenever you put a comment in the system, you've got to use 2 forward slashes. That tells the compiler to completely ignore whatever it is that you are copying and pasting, or you can do a block comment by a /* star, and then in that, and then end that with a */. Now I'm just going to post my assignment in there. Well, it's not going. Hang on. Okay, and I just went in there and put enter in most of the sentences so that I get all of that in here with my block comment. Make sure when you do the block comment that this asterisk and this / is after this period or whatever you have in here. Whether you do it on a new line or whether you do it on the same line like this, doesn't really matter, but it does tell the compiler that you're done with all of your comments at the end of that block. So you've got to make sure to do that. Now also remember that we're kind of missing a step here, because you should do at least your pseudocode or your flowchart before you get started to write your program, so that you understand which variables you're going to use, you understand what your computations and what your processes are going to be, and you understand what all your output is going to be. And then when we write the program, we have to do it input, process, and then output. And then that is with the exception of the methods, because the methods could be written like anywhere in the program outside of the main though, because in the main is where you're going to call those methods. So I'm going to use double height, width, area, and perimeter. Okay. Remember, the double type is the default type used in C#. And then because I have already added all of this out in my flowchart or in my pseudocode, I know that I'm going to be using a method. So I'm going to just go ahead and type in this method that I'm using. Okay, so do remember that any time you are using a method, you can call that method by using the method name. Get size here is the method name, and we're going to get height. And you can see I've got red lines all over the place. Why do you think I would have red lines all over the place? You got to know your rules. You got to read your book. You got to look this information up, because you have to know your rules. Well, with height, this is going to have to be in quotations right here. And this has got to be deleted. And then our semicolon is what needs to end the statement. So we're saying, and we are, again, we're putting our variables out there. We have declared height when we say double height, and then now we're initializing height to get size, and then we want it to be height, or we can use the same module to get the width. Make sure you do not forget that semicolon at the end. Every language is different. Every language is different. Okay, so now my computations that I've already written down in, I like flowcharts myself, but my competition that I've put down is area equal compute area with the argument of height and width, because that's the information that has to pass through what I'm getting ready to do here with compute area. So area equals compute area, height and width. And I can do that because I know I'm going to make a module or a method called compute area in this method, and then when I want to use it, I can just call it in any single time. Perimeter, we're going to use perimeter equals compute perimeter. And again, height and width are going to be the arguments that we're going to use. Then this is our you can see that this main is laid out in our, get information in and then process and then output, because we're getting our information up here in our variables that we are not only displaying up here that this is the perimeters that we're going to use, but we're also initializing them to a value. And you can initialize them. You can initialize them to, it doesn't have to be a number or like a specific thing. You can initialize them to a variable. So when the variable changes, then what you've initialized it to, that is going to change as well. And then we're doing our processing here in the middle, and then now we're going to do our display, or our display results is what I'm going to use, but now we're going to do our output. So input, process, output, always. Do not forget that semicolon after every single statement. Apparently I cannot spell perimeter today. Yeah. Okay, so then we're going to display the results, and we're getting the results for the height, the width, the area, and the perimeter, because remember this says this is how we're going to display it. And then it should be formatted and printed in a tabular display. So I mentioned that you want to look at a place in your book where there should be a table that talks about how to format that so it can be printed in tabular display. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create my get size method. Okay, so in this right here, public is, remember, that's the accessibility. So you can access this outside of the class. And static tells us that the method actually belongs to the type rather than a specific object or a class. And then double tells us what type it is. Get size is the name of the method. And then we have to verify the type of the variable in parentheses there that we're going to pass the information through. Now, every time you have a block of code in C#, you've got to have it in those little curly braces. The only time you don't is if you have only one statement to run. And so we have to, because we're creating a new method here, we have to do our curly braces. And always do a closing curly brace as soon as you do an opening curly brace, because that way you won't forget it. And if you're missing braces, you're going to get a compilation error whenever you get ready to run your program. So we're going to use variables string in value double side console then we're going to write So if you look at that table in your book and you see that I have the 0 in the curly braces here. So what that's doing is that's saying that this 0 indicates the first argument. Okay, so our argument up here in our public static double get size string, we only have the 1, so we have the 0. If there's nothing else in there, no colon, no F4, no any of those things, we're just saying that there is no special formatting that needs to be done with this argument. That table, by the way, is in your book on page 105. So the next line that I'm going to do is I'm going to initialize the in value variable. So in value, because our user is going to put in whatever we want, whatever the user wants to put in, we're going to make it equal to console.readline. Because we're going to tell the compiler that we need to read whatever the user is going to put in. And then I'm going to set side equal to double.parse in value. Do not forget the semicolon or you will have issues all over the place. And make sure you spell these correctly. If you're using a variable, I spelled it side here, I did not spell it side here, and so it says side does not exist in the current context. It's having all kinds of issues with that. So make sure that you spell stuff correctly. That's very important. The reason we use parse here is because this is going to return a string, a number representation of the string argument. So anytime you have a user that is putting in a value, that value is a string. So even if it's a number, it's still going to be considered a string by the compiler. So we have to use our parse to convert that to a number value so that we then can do some math on it. Another thing that we have to remember is that we do want a value to return. Notice that we did public static, but we did not use the word up here in the main void. We did not use that because we expect a return value. So I'm going to type return side. I'm going to just stop and just kind of just save the project for a little bit. Do that every once in a while. And then just notice, you know, once I did my return statement and kind of clicked around in here a little bit, then all my little red wiggly lines kind of went away, which sometimes that happens whenever you're doing programming. If you know what you're doing and you've got it all mapped out already, don't get concerned until you get everything put in there. All right, so another method, because see, now they're coming back again. All right, another method that we want to do is the compute area method. So again, I'm going to put in both of my squiggly braces so that I don't forget that. I want to line them up so that I can visually see this goes under this, this goes under this, you know, this goes under this. 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, those two together, those two together, those two together. So even though I've got little squiggly lines under that, I know that I'm doing it right because I can see that I can log each of them there. All right. So public, I'm going to make this public, static, double compute area is the name. Again, remember I did my duty before I started this program, so I know what I'm doing. We're going to use double height and double width for our arguments in this. And then I simply want to say return height times width. I think it's arguing with me about my so you don't have nearly as much problem with that in C# as you do with Python. Python is really strict about it. All right, so I got that all created. The next thing I'm going to do is the compute perimeter one, the compute perimeter method. So again, I like to start off putting my curly braces just so I know I don't mess them up. And then you notice that we do not have a void in there. So what we have to put in here is a return statement. And that's where we can also put our computation. And again, do not forget that little semicolon because it will come back at you. I misspelled compute perimeter. Gotta look for that. Make sure you look for it. No matter how good you get at spelling it all, you can still, you know, make some mistakes. Okay. So now I'm going to create, now that that's all done, again, got the processing done, and now we're going to work on the output. So we do not have a return in this because we're using the word void. And everything that I'm repeating to you here is rules. If you don't understand the rules, you're going to have a really hard time with your programming. It's extremely important that you learn the rules. The rules are specific to whichever programming language you are using. Now I'm going to create my curly braces again, because I want to make sure that I do not miss out on having those curly braces. So the first thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a console.clear. The console.clear, you notice it comes up in our Great IntelliSense right there. The console.clear, what it does is it clears anything out that might still be sitting in the queue before, you know, it prints. So if we do the clear, then we know if there was anything left in there before that, why are you doing this? Jump over there, please and thank you. That if there was anything that was in there before, it's going to be cleared out before the actual printout goes. So, you know, say for example, you're in a grocery store and you've rung up all your groceries and you get not only your grocery list, but you also get someone else's grocery receipt, and you're like, why am I getting their receipt? I don't want their receipt. Well, and then, you know, the grocery store doesn't really want you to have their receipt either. So what they have to do is after every order is processed, they have to clear this screen so that the person that is sitting in there and, you know, getting, you know, I love these ones where you don't have to talk to anybody. You just go in, ring up your stuff, and then you're out of your way, especially if you don't have to get very much. And so it has to clear the screen and make sure that, you know, I only get what I bought, because I don't need to know what somebody else bought. More than that, I really don't want the paper reprinted and wasting paper either. So we're just gonna do summary of rectangle measurements. Okay. This is a statement. Have to make sure to put our semicolon on the end. And then I'm going to do it again. When you have a lot of console.write lines, you can copy and paste. And this one, I'm going to do it here in just a second. Okay, so once again, we have to have the semicolon at the end. We have a console.write line 0, dash 15. These are your formatting stuff. I told you go look at that table. And then the reason we have a comma is because we have two separate things here that we're going to be printing out. So the formatting has got to be separated, even though it's in quotes, it's got to be separated from what we want the user to see, which is height. And so we had to put a comma in between there. Height has to have quotations around it because that's going to print out to the screen. And we have a space between our colon here and our quote, because if we don't have that space, it's oftentimes when it prints out, words or letters or whatever is printing is going to run right into what we want the user to see there. So there would be no space in there if we don't put it there. Now I'm just going to copy, Control C, go on the next line, Control V. Everything is changed except this has got to be width. So that saves you some typing, right? Then I can do it again, Control V, because the next one's going to be area. And the next one's going to be perimeter. Okay, and that's it. So let me just show you real quick. We still have a lot of red wiggly areas there. Why on earth would we have them? Do you see anything? Does anything pop out at you? I want you to go in there and look and see what you think it is. I'll give you 1 second. Okay, so now I'm going to show you exactly what the problem was. Now this is not going to recognize anything because I ended this with a semicolon. So remember what I said, those semicolons are really important, but they have to be on the end of a statement, not on the end of a beginning of a method. It is very important that those are not there. And looky there, now we have a misspelling there. So we have to make sure things are being spelled correctly. Compute perimeter is how it was created, right down here. It's got to be written the same way when I call it up here in the main. There's all the red wiggly lines are gone. Everything looks really good. Let's just go ahead and run this program and see what happens. Okay, so this window pops up. It says enter the height. I'm going to say 3. And then it says enter the width. I'm going to say it's 7. It's a weird one. And then, whoa, and below, what do you think causes that problem? Well, there's something here that's missing. Remember, I keep telling you guys, you cannot miss this in your program. Console.read key. Because what it does is it's really made to read like the next line, but what happens is when you're running the program, it completely disappears and it doesn't stay up on the screen if you don't have that there. So I'm going to change that, put console.read key in there and save it. Now let's run it and see what happens. Okay, so now we enter the height, 32. And let's do 23. Why not? Let's do it backwards. But now you can see the screen stays up and you can see everything on there. Be sure to always check your math and just make sure that it's coming out with the proper outcome on the math. It does not have to, you don't have to understand the math. You just have to make sure it's coming out with the proper thing, because otherwise you're going to go get a whole nother degree in business and finance and have to learn what all those formulas and everything mean. You just need to know how to plug in the numbers and make sure that it works, okay? I hope this session was helpful. Have a wonderful day and let me know if you need anything.